Selectmen to order. It's Monday, June 6th, 2016, and the time is 6:30. As required by the open meeting law, we are informing you that the town will be video and audio taping as well as broadcasting this public meeting. In addition, anyone who intends to video or audio tape this meeting is required to notify the chair. Please rise and join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Any weekly briefings? Public comments and
Mr.
announcements.
Chairman,
Oh.
I just wanted on the weekly briefing. We did have an issue in the office. I had the unfortunately, we did not get an item on to the agenda that we should have had on the agenda. So we did have a notice of public hearing for a petition by Cumberland Farms to amend the fuel storage license between the town and Cumberland Farms at their location at 574 and 576 Route 28 in Harwich Port. The proposal was to change out the tanks. Each tank was 24,000, or the total of 24,000, to go to 40,000 gallons. I don't know if anyone is here specifically for that topic or not, but because we didn't put it on the agenda, staff and I thought it would be prudent to have another date. So we are posting the same thing for, and this is where we need the board's indulgence, to have the new public hearing date would be June 20th. We have a meeting on the 27th, however, the attorney for Cumberland Farms is unable to make that date. So as to not hold them up too long and to give us enough time to do notice, we're recommending the 20th, which is by your schedule, an off night.
Thank you, Chris. Would the board be willing to meet the 20th for a short hearing?
I won't be here, but.
Okay.
Unless you
Janelle?
have a quorum.
Yes, I can make that work.
And
We'll make it work.
Great.
Okay.
20th.
6:30 will be the start time.
Great.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Chris. Any other weekly briefings? Okay, on to public comment and announcement.
Hello, good evening. I'm Eileen Brady, and I'm the president now of the Harwich Historical Society. And I want to introduce our new executive director, Janet Cassidy, who is a Harwich resident and who started working at the Brooks Academy in early May. And Janet is here tonight, and she has a few announcements to make.
Congratulations and welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and I look forward to working with the town. Just a couple of quick announcements. This Thursday is the reopening of our farmers market in the usual place across from the museum. Our opening day is Sunday, the 19th of June, and after that we will be open on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I believe it is, at the same hours as last time. And the third announcement is that the Crowell Barn is nearing completion finally, and will be that will also be open on opening day. I'm not sure whether every nail will be in place by then, but it will be very soon. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I have a
One
quick
question, go ahead.
If a person wanted to get involved with the farmer's market, how could they go about doing that? As
You
far as
could-
being a vendor?
You could call me at the museum, or you could get in touch with Mark Coleman through the Historical Society website.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Chief?
Mr. Chairman, just by way of a public announcement from the public safety community, I just wanted to let the board know that I just recently shared with Town Administrator Chris Clark that this Thursday at Bentley University, the Municipal Police Training Committee is recognizing a number of public safety officials for their CPR and first responder capabilities. And our very own Fire Chief Norm Clark, our Deputy Police Chief Tom Gagnon, and one of our Harwich officers, Derek Dutra, are being recognized at Bentley University on Thursday at 9 a.m. for saving a woman's life last year on the bike trail when she went into cardiac arrest. So just announcing that to the board. I'm sure you'll join me in congratulating them, and I couldn't be prouder of our police officers and my colleague over at the fire department. So that's it.
Thank you, Chief. moving on, can I get there's one change in the consent agenda. Under D, it's approve application for a special permit for relief from the town noise bylaw, Section G, for an event to be held on June, it's actually 25th, not the 28th, by the Kukunis family. So we did receive that change, and the applications have been changed. So Julie, could I get a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Yes, Mr. Chair, I move that we approve the minutes from May 23rd, 2016, the regular session, May 23rd, 2016, the executive session, and May 31st, 2016, the executive session. B, accept the donations amounting to $6,158 received from the Rockin' for the Reef event to be deposited in the Reef account. C, to approve the application for change of manager on liquor license for Allen Harbor Yacht Club. D, approve the application for a special permit for relief from the town noise bylaw, Section G, for an event to be held on June 25th, 2016, by the Kukunis family. E, approve and sign Muddy Creek change orders. F, confirm the appointment of Katie Varley as executive assistant to the police chief effective on July 1st, 2016. G, confirm the appointment of Josh Majka as laborer for the water department effective on June 13th, 2016. And H, approve the applications for the Chamber of Commerce parade on September 18th and road race on June 25th.
Second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Okay, any public hearings and presentations? Chief?
I'm sorry, we usually do this before you vote the consent agenda, but I have Katie Varley here with me tonight, and I thought the board might be interested in, I'm sure many of you probably know her, but come on up, Katie. Katie is going to be replacing the executive assistant, my executive assistant at Harwich Police Department. Karen Young has served in that capacity, or has served the Harwich Police Department with distinction for 30 years. So she's going to be retiring effective in July, and we held a process, and Katie did astoundingly well. She's been employed by the police department actually for the last 6 years as a dispatcher, and prior to that, she has experience working as an executive assistant to a chief, and she's been a police officer as well. She was actually hired by Harwich in 2005 as a police officer, but then was laid off and went over to the town of Brewster. So she comes to us with a ton of experience. I'm supremely confident that it's going to be a very, very smooth transition. And you know, at the same time, we're all very sad to see Karen go. She's an extraordinary woman, done a fantastic job, and I'm sure Katie will do a fantastic job also.
Great. Welcome aboard.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Dan has some words for you, too.
How you doing? Following the chief's lead here, Dan, the Harwich Water Superintendent. I just wanted to first thank you guys for approving the initial pay increase for the distribution labor position. We were able to get about 30 applicants, and through two rounds of interviews, we narrowed it down to Josh. He comes from us from the Robert Hour Company. He spent a number of years over at the Dennis Water District, and had everyone had great words to say about him. So I just want to thank you guys and let you know he's coming our way.
Thank you, Dan. Okay, any old business? New business?
So, Mr. Chairman, I think I'll take this one if that's okay.
Yes.
We have a town meeting had approved for a potential acquisition of the Marini property, and the town has historically pursued a grant that's LAND, called the land grant, up to $400,000. In terms of the Marini acquisition, that negotiations is still ongoing, and it would be really just to acquire the conservation restriction rights. So if the town is able to accomplish that, and prior to, I think, the end of next fiscal year, the town would be eligible for up to $400,000 in matching funds. I think the acquisition by the town was, I think, $800,000 was our
Yes.
piece to that. So this would be 50% of that. So this is just really just the application materials to make sure that we get in and have the eligibility. And then if we do the closing, then we'll have to do the closing to make it happen. And then we also have to be approved. I know in the time I've been here, we've had one approved and one did not get approved. I think they have a hard time giving the same town the grant every year. So we are in an off year, so hopefully this year we'll have more luck. But anyway, that's what's behind that request, and we will work closely with Michael Lack from HCT to apply for that application.
Great, thank you. Any discussion from the board? Could I get a motion on this?
Mr. Chairman, I'll move that we authorize the town administrator and the Conservation Commission to prepare and submit applications for a state land, that's LAND, grant of up to $400,000 to acquire the Marini property.
Second.
Any discussion? So the motion is to authorize the town administrator and the Conservation Commission to prepare and submit application for a land grant of up to $400,000 to acquire the Marini property. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. So moved. Okay, the next topic is B, Beach Road easement issue. Chris?
Yeah, I will try to provide an overview, and I'm sure that there's residents here that want to be heard on the issue as well. I've been the administrator here since December 2013, so this has been a little bit of a history lesson for me to find out where we are and what's transpired. But from what we found in the files, just to kind of to summarize the issue, in March of 1972, annual town meeting approved for the town of Harwich to take, and this is important, an easement in Beach Road. So it's not the acquisition of property, it's just the acquisition of the right to access the property. And the people that have a right to the property are the Fitzpatricks. I don't know if the Fitzpatricks are here this evening. They are. So they can certainly speak for themselves. But long story short, there was some litigation that ensued. I think the litigation, we have some material here that goes back to February of 2009. The settlement agreement, which we do have on the town's website and is available for public viewing if so desired, that the town had there was a litigation and there was a stipulation for dismissal and basically a settlement agreement that was reached. And the date of that it was signed was the 6th of May, 2013. I'm not going to go through all the components of it, but I do think it's important to highlight a few of these. That there's basically, I guess, it's about 8 items in total. And it has, the first one is the northerly portion of Beach Road access. The town will place signage noting public access to water. No boat storage is allowed. Private property is not available for public use, and dogs are banned. The town will install signage and maintain and replace as necessary. The second, the town will maintain the responsibility for trimming the vegetation and will not delegate nor permit work to be undertaken by private property owners in the adjacent neighborhood. Third, the Board of Selectmen of the town of Harwich will authorize the town administrator to forward a letter to the Fitzpatrick informing them that the town has no present plans to seek an extension of the groin that presently exists and extends seaward from the southeast portion of the Fitzpatrick property. We did have that letter in the file as well, so that was complied with from what I was able to ascertain. The town will remove and will, number 4, the town will remove and will agree to keep off any town website, any reference to Beach Road as being a town beach. It says also, while the town shall, under no obligation to respond to complaints regarding the public's use of Beach Road, the town will respond if in its discretion the circumstances warrant. The fifth one is the town will amend its pending Chapter 91 license application regarding beach nourishment on the Fitzpatrick property. Number 6, which is a little bit of a longer one, that the town, through its appropriate agents, will consult with the Fitzpatrick in creating a plan to address erosion control within the layout of Beach Road. In addition, the Fitzpatrick will consult with the town and its appropriate agents to address regrading of Beach Road, the principal focus being the creation of a more gradual change in elevation versus the sharper change that presently exists. I think this may be kind of one of the elements that's in dispute, is some work's been done, and did the applicant or did the owner of the property, the Fitzpatricks, have the right to do that work? So again, this is a town agreement with the Fitzpatricks that say what we can do and what we can't do. And then 7 and 8 are just that it's binding and that this is part of the stipulation of dismissal. But I think it is an important thing. It's unusual, at least in my experience, that a eminent domain was taken not to acquire the property, but only the easement. And in that circumstance, that means that the property stays, in this case, with the Fitzpatricks. So the town has just simply obtained the easement over it and did enter into a settlement agreement. I'd imagine the litigation, if the first legal opinion was done in February of '09 and the settlement finally came out in May of '13, I have a feeling there was probably a lot of litigation that went around this, and this is the end result. And I think as the executive authority, the Board of Selectmen is the one that entered into this agreement. And certainly, I think as a town, we have an obligation to comply to the rules of what that agreement lays out.
Thank you, Chris. I notice Amy Usowski is here, our Conservation Administrator. Amy, could you speak about the violation or non-violation?
You know, I was just going to get up. Amy Usowski, Conservation Administrator for the town. First, won't go back into history, other than just to kind of let the public know what happened this spring. So Mr. Fitzpatrick applied administratively through my office to be able to remove the invasive plants that were on the side of the easement and replant native. At that time, I wasn't privy to the agreement. People have to understand with conservation, who owns what and where your property lines are isn't really our purview. It's resource areas and wetlands. So from my perspective, removing of the invasives in the buffer zone to the coastal dune was a positive thing. He was willing to do it, and that work has been done. In that plan, which I do have a copy of the plan if you'd like it, it does show a split rail fence at the toe of a dune, and there's been a lot of discussion over the years about man-made, not man-made. In our eyes, it's a protected resource. It's naturalized. Over the years, the Fitzpatricks have had numerous renditions of types of fencing down there to protect the toe of the dune. And I saw this as no different this year. Yes, it is a split rail fence as opposed to a sand drift fence, which is much more flimsy. However, and again, location, to me, it's the toe of the dune. I don't know where property lines necessarily do or don't lie in easements, but from the conservation perspective, I felt that it was a good thing to put this there to keep people not off the sand, but off the dune itself, which is a protected resource under the Wetlands Protection Act and our bylaws. So hopefully I didn't overstep the easement or in any way. It was certainly not my intention to do so, but that was essentially what happened. And then I did get a number of emails, which is why I brought it to the attention of the selectmen. So I got a number of emails that was really above and beyond my purview as conservation administrator about regarding whether or not this meets the language of the settlement and the rights of the agreement. So I do have pretty much everything you could possibly want on this, because I did ask the town surveyor for some documentation that I did not have, just to educate myself too. But just, that's kind of how things transpired, and the access is still open to the water down there. Did you receive, I did email today and last week some photos recently, and then earlier today sent some kind of more historic photos.
Yes.
So, okay.
Thank
Thanks.
you, Amy.
And I'm here if you have any questions or anybody else does.
Great, thank you. Any comments from the board before I open it up to the public? Great.
I just,
Go ahead.
I just asked the question, I noticed in the settlement agreement, basically only the town is responsible, the town is responsible for any trimming and whatnot down there. And do we have any history of any trimming? I see in these pictures that, at least as far as the walkway goes, it looks like, you know, I call it the vegetation, at least on the westerly side as you get closer to the beach where the sign is that sort of intruding upon the walkway?
Yeah, that that vegetation is mostly invasive, bittersweet, rugosa rose, honeysuckle and whatnot. The town does go down on a routine basis. I mean, that stuff, it grows aggressively. Bittersweet can grow 15 feet in a year. So they do go down to maintain an open access along the boardwalk, but they basically only trim to the edges of the boardwalk. So when Mr. Fitzpatrick asked, can he, remove more of it and plant some good stuff, that's on one side. I did say, okay, under conservation, you can do that. But the town, the highway department does maintain access there.
Okay, if I just continue, so the intent is that people use the walkway, I mean, that's what it's there for, right? But the intent on the town's part, as far as trimming goes, is to keep that walkway open.
That's right.
And, in this particular picture, it shows that it's open, but it's not fully open, I guess I would just describe it.
Right. That was probably taken, are those my photos? Or,
I don't know, where'd they come from?
Yes.
yeah.
They're the ones
So
that-
that was
may be the
before, that
historic
was
one.
before maintenance started for the year. That was
Okay.
probably a month or two ago. But again, highway always calls me and says when they're gonna be out there. They just make sure people can walk down to the,
Okay, and if I
Water.
could just ask, you said the intent is, on the Fitzpatrick's part, is to plant better stuff? What do you mean by that?
native plantings, plantings that are indigenous to this area. Bayberry, and Mr. Fitzpatrick is here, bayberry, some beach plum, cedars, things that do better in a windy, very salty environment. Pure sandy soils, you put American beach grass in. So to restore more of a native community there, which actually will result in less maintenance having to be done by the town.
And does it do a better job on erosion control?
It
in your
does,
opinion?
yep. The invasive plants have a very, very poor root system. It's a very shallow root system. So even though it looks like a complete tangle and thicket up on top, underneath there's really nothing holding the sediment. So native plants, such as the ones I mentioned, do a much better job holding, making the area more stable.
Okay, if you don't mind, Mr. Chairman. So when you gave the okay to do that, change the plantings, if you will, was there any attempt to either put a sign up or notify anybody else down there that this was gonna happen, or did someone just show up one day and say, oh, they're digging it up? Or, I mean, I could just see, or I could just imagine that people would say, oh, they're digging it up, they're changing something, we didn't know about it.
There were some questions. This is a type of a project where in my department, we like to encourage people to do good things for the environment, such as this. So I did it under an administrative review permit, which does not require a butter notification. I don't know, but it didn't seem like many of the emails that we did receive, more people seemed more concerned about the fence than the plantings. So, I mean, but it was not advertised.
Okay, thank you. I'm good.
So Amy, in the letter from Copeland and Page from 2009, on page 2, there's it ends, the last 2 paragraphs, it's talking about the fencing. And in the settlement, the fencing is not actually mentioned at all in any of the points.
That's right.
So the last paragraph in the Copeland from 2009 says, I note that in particular the 3-rail split fence shown on the improvement plan does not appear to attempt to address a conservation issue and seems to have as its sole purpose the protection of Miss Fitzgerald's property line. And then there's more. So if a citizen is reading this and then also reading the settlement, it's incongruous. So can you speak to that?
Well,
I mean,
maybe I'll try to speak to that. I think one of the things that's transpired, again, I don't have a lot of the history, so maybe one of the selectmen that were here, but what appeared to be was, it was 2009 that Coleman and Page rendered that decision. And the settlement agreement didn't come out until 2013. So Copeland and Page made a suggestion that the town enter into a revocable license agreement for work to be done. And we have no record of that license agreement in the office. So what Copeland and Page had suggested didn't become operational. litigation did ensue at some point after that, and it went to the court system. And in the stipulation for dismissal or settlement agreement is where the town and the Fitzpatricks came up with what was agreeable to both sides. So to have a legal opinion that makes a suggestion is exactly that, a suggestion, versus the weight of the law, which is the stipulation agreement.
I only mean to
Yeah.
point out that the settlement doesn't address the fencing issue at all. And therefore, as a citizen, reading the
Sure.
agenda packet, you know, it's, and you said most of the emails were concerned about the split rail fence this time around. So I think
That's
it's something that we
what
need
it
to
appeared to
truly
me
address.
from the emails.
Yeah, and just in terms of that, I did get a couple of inquiries. I'm trying to remember when you and I went to look at that, I think it was last fall, about some of the plantings that were done.
Yeah.
And we did provide to the neighbors, or at least one of the neighbors, the decision that you had made to allow the work
Yeah.
to happen. And that seemed to, you know, at least be responsive to the neighbors' concerns, that he wasn't just doing it on his own, he did it with permission of
Yeah.
the town. The fencing is a newer issue that has come up, and now the fencing has become another
The
issue.
location of the fencing. Just to note, there was a order of conditions issued by the Conservation Commission a number of years ago for that dune, and it also shows fencing at the toe of it at that time, so.
Yeah, just a moment. Thank you, Amy. Any other comments from the board? So I'm going to let,
The fencing is noted in compliments.
go ahead and say it.
So in this letter from Copeland, I'm just pointing out that further down on page 1, it does reference that there were various types of fencing noted on the plan, the older plan. So in terms of whether or not the fencing did exist.
Thank you. So this is not a public hearing, it is a public meeting. You guys took the time to come, so I will let you speak. I'd ask that you keep it fairly brief, a couple minutes, and if you're going to say the same thing that the person in front of you said, just try and keep it as brief as we can. When you got to speak from the microphone, just state your name.
Mr. Chairman, I think it's also fair to point out that at least I haven't been privy to the emails that Amy has received or whatever. I don't think any of us have.
Yeah, and that is, we have not read any of the emails yet.
I did give a copy.
So if we have to reschedule this as a public hearing, we will do that. But please feel free to speak.
My name's Nathan Scher, and I have a question for Amy about conservation.
Great.
How does this, can you explain how a split rail fence protects a dune?
Sure.
Keeps people.
A split rail fence, just like symbolic fencing for piping plovers and whatnot, it serves to keep people off of a protected resource, wetlands, protected resource of both the State Act and the Wetlands Bylaw. And again, I mean absolutely no disrespect in terms of the easement and the language of the easement, but for me, I have to keep the two separate. So that type of fencing, if it's at the toe of the dune, it keeps people from running up the dune, jumping off of it, which in turn causes erosion, destabilization of the dune, things like that.
Thank you, Amy.
Good evening. I'm Gerard Elias. I'm a resident of Pinewood Lane, year-round resident. Amy has used the term on a couple of occasions referencing the toe of the dune. And I think that's an important issue because I think what has, among many things, the community upset about what we found when we came back from our winter travels, without any notice, by the way, to the community, I should add, is that the toe appears to have been extended. The snow fence follows a zigzag pattern that is embedded within the dune itself, and what I would consider to be the toe of the dune. What's happened subsequent is that the split rail fence was erected, and the split rail fence follows a much direct and much more in a westerly direction, much more direct line. It actually abuts the boardwalk, and it appears to be somewhat of a land grab, quite frankly. So I think what I would, among other things, encourage the selectmen to do is to take another look at that split rail fence to see exactly where it has been constructed. And I would lastly add that in the drawing that I saw that the Fitzpatrick submitted for the consent to Amy, I don't believe that those drawings are wholly consistent with what has been actually erected.
Thank you.
Mark McGowan, I live in Rabbit Run, just around the corner from the beach. Yes, it is a land grab, because the fact is that, and I'm not gonna go back and rehash it, but you folks, a lot of you don't know what's going on over there. The fact is that Beach Road basically came through, and that's a paper road. And the fact is that if you go back to his deed and see what his property lines are and what that Beach Road was, that was a 40-foot right away going through. Fact is, back in 1972, town of Harwich turned around and said, fine, we're going to, because things, when you have a paper road, you get half and half. So whoever's across the street gets half and half. So the town turns around and says, okay, we're gonna maintain, so we're gonna take it as eminent domain. And so we now, as the town, has full right of access through to the 2 parcels that were given to the town of Harwich by the Chase family. And also to note that the town hasn't continued to maintain 2 beautiful waterfront properties. And that's an injustice. I mean, it's something that you should really take to heart, because we're losing a fantastic beach for the neighborhood. But anyways, to get back to it, is that everybody's lost sight, is that it's a grab. And the fact is Fitzpatrick is just continually moving in a direction. We have, and you talked about an easement. Well, we should have full easement, full 40 feet, 184 feet, going down to those 2 parcels. We should have full access. The way he's continually taking and putting these obstacles and changing the flower structure or the shrub structure is an outrage. The fact is that he needs to be stopped, because the fact is, and we thought last year everything was finally agreed to, and we were all accepting of where it was at, which wasn't even fantastic and accept, I mean, I still have exceptions to it, but the fact is that now he turns around and does it on the sly, and I'm sorry, he is. It's a land grab, and I agree with Gerald. So, town needs to look at it a little further.
Thank you.
Kevin O'Shea, also around the corner, Rabbit Run. I respectfully would like to bring up the discussion about the split rail fence again from the standpoint of protecting. I suggest that erosion is more likely to happen through natural causes, the waves and things like that. I fail to see how the split rail fence does anything to protect those dunes, from what is likely the biggest risk. The chances of somebody jumping on it and running up the dunes is remote. We've been down there for 18 years. It doesn't happen. The biggest risk hasn't even been dealt with, which is the waves eating away at that dune. And a split rail fence, particularly this one, is not going to solve that. And I agree with others that where it is, you folks may not have had the luxury of seeing what's been redone there, but it is substantially different than anything I've seen in the drawings. So I'd appreciate any follow-up on that.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Ruth Stevenson. I live at 16 Pine Needle Lane, which is in the vicinity of Little Beach, and we use Little Beach. And the comment I'd like to make tonight has to do again with the fencing. And there are a couple of things that are pertinent, I believe. One, the split rail fencing itself is not going to prevent erosion. I think common sense would tell us all that. I believe the lady who addressed that issue mentioned that it was to keep people out from climbing on the dune, and that seems somewhat unrealistic to begin with, insofar as the dune itself is scrubby and, to the best of our knowledge, may contain contaminants when it was first created. It's not a natural dune. It was created when Mr. Fitzpatrick redid it, tore down the house that was there, cleaned out the basement, and then erected the house that is now there. I doubt that any of the parents whose children are playing on Little Beach itself would want their kids zooming up this artificial erection that may indeed have contaminants within it leaking out. At the same time, Mr. Fitzpatrick has erected something that might be very appealing to young children. That is, the snow fences, which have been referenced, are put in triangles and rectangles, and they look like little playpens. I can imagine my 3 grandchildren, 2, 3, and 4, wanting to gamble about and enjoy themselves. I can imagine a harried mother putting her child in them simply to think, oh, God, stay there for now while I, change your shoes or something. So the fences themselves seem like a very bad idea in the basis of health, on the basis of what could happen to those children once they're in there, because the snow fences have fallen down at least 3 times. They're sharp. They're made of wire holding them together. The wire will rust. That's not a good situation. So I hope very much that you will do something about the snow fences. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Audrey Ely. I live at 28 Green Needle Lane. And I was here 3 years ago, and not all of, I think one gentleman was here, I recall. And we had some pretty heated discussions and a lot of emotions expressed by people that have used this beach for 50 years. And I think the bottom line here, besides some of the legalities, is that an agreement was made with Mr. Fitzpatrick. It was a compromise. We had attorneys, he had attorneys, and I think that the selectmen at the time assured us that they were not going to remove this beautiful beach from the neighborhood, and that it wasn't the intention of the board when they changed it from a beach to town access to water, that the neighbors would not be able to sit on the beach. In fact, they made jokes about, no, the police are not going to come and take you off of it. That's fine. And that this gentleman has really done something to the spirit of that agreement, because when you walk down that boardwalk, you see this fortification cutting into the middle of the beach. It goes right up, it abuts that boardwalk that the town put in a couple years ago, a lovely boardwalk, and is this huge triangle. And it just does scream land grab, and it is just not a very pleasant and neighborly thing to do. And again, it really contradicts the spirit of the agreement that the town struck with him.
Thank you. Amy?
I would just like to make the offer if any of the selectmen wanted to come down with me to see the site, because some of the members of the board weren't here during the past few years. I would be more than happy to bring you down there so you can see, not just through pictures, but so you can see what we're talking about.
Great, thank you, Amy.
Amy, while Amy's up there, Amy,
Peter?
could I just ask you a question for clarification?
Sure.
This picture, which I think you sent us,
Mm-hmm.
so it looks like, it's hard to understand this, because it looks like the snow fence is partially either knocked down or moved or something.
Yes.
But what you had, I'll say authorized for lack of anything else, was that a combination of snow fence and split rail fence?
It just, I said split rail. There's been snow fence there before. Actually, the combination of the two works best in either capturing sand that's windblown and anything that's eroding down, because the regular sand or snow fence, as they used to have there, as everybody knows, it was very flimsy. It was not safe either. It would come down readily. So that really wasn't benefiting the dune, the beach, anything there. Having something that the combination of the two is actually better in terms of stabilization. I don't remember exactly if I permitted a combination or the other, but I actually, if you'd permit me, I have a copy of the plan that was given to me with the application that might help you out a little bit.
Okay, it
Can I
just looks like, to me, it's a combination of snow fence and split rail, and it's not clear to me whether this is actually the way it was supposed to be done or not, I don't know.
So I mean, I've not witnessed things, but I mean, there's been reports of vandalism and whatnot down there. And also, I mean, it is a very dynamic area in terms of the wind and the current and the waves that do come up at times. So I haven't seen things knocked down like that, but I don't know if somebody else here can speak to that. But I'd be more than happy to give you, so you have a copy of what I saw when I had permitted this administratively. And I'll definitely get you, I apologize, I'll get you copies of all the letters. There's probably about 40 of them, and any other information you may need.
Thank you, Amy. Janelle?
I went today and looked at this beach, and this picture, Peter, does not represent what is there right now. But there is snow fencing that is erected. Our picture that we have, it appears to be maybe windblown or, had been knocked over. Currently, as of 4:30 today, there is a combination of split rail and sand fence. What is it? Snow fence.
Angela?
Sorry, the bigger of the two plans is the more recent.
Thank you.
I just think that perhaps
Thank you, Amy.
our conservation director should make a comment because, excuse me, this isn't unique. I mean, if you want to see split rail fences and the other type of fence, walk down to Pleasant Road Beach. And I know for a fact that at one corner of Pleasant Road Beach, the split rail fences were up there and other fences were there, and a judgment was made to take them down. And they were taken down. And within 6 months, everybody was pleading to put them back up because the destruction to the dunes from people, not particularly people who live here,
Right.
but people who come and rent houses and all, don't have any idea that dunes should be protected, and they run all over them.
Right.
So this is not a unique thing to this one beach. It's all over
Yeah.
this town and every other town. It's not something that she's invented, I don't think.
No, and it's actually, there's a very, not a science necessarily, because it's not to that level, but as far as where you locate these type of zigzag, we'll just call them that because it's a mishmash of different things, zigzag fences. The design zigzag is important because that is what captures sand either on its way out or on its way in. And you have to place them perpendicular to the primary wind direction. You have to have it so many feet above mean high water, which in this location, we all know, there's not a lot. So the placement of them is key. We do permit these administratively in my department. I have gone out and talked with homeowners about ones who have illegal ones or brand new ones and had them take them down and instructed them how to do it correctly. So there is a little bit of logic behind this. And again, I'm not speaking in terms of the easement and who has the rights of way. That is not my purview. I'm just looking at how, because that area is eroding, how can we better stop it from eroding? And I would like to speak with the selectmen in the future. We did it a few years ago about how to improve that path so we can further decrease erosion in that area while still providing access.
Thank you, Amy.
Excuse me, since you're at the, quick question.
You'll have to get up to the mic.
Oh, construction.
You'll have to get up to the mic.
That's all I'm asking. She talked about construction of the fence.
But the people in the public and they're watching on TV can't see you, can't hear you. So the microphone, please.
Amy, could you just tell me about the construction of the fence? Is concrete footings holding this fence up?
I permitted the fence. I did not I did not look at foundations and footings and things like that.
Go ahead.
Good evening, board and members. My name is Trudy Delory. I am at 20 Pinewood Lane, and this has been a nearly 20-year painful history with what has gone on at 43 Shore Road. I actually have some pictures. that go back 40 years to what the beach was. And please forgive me, I titled it Land Encroachment at Public Beach Number 22. I did not see the 2013 decision that said it was not to be referred to that way anymore. I looked at a brochure from the wherever you pick up the beach permits that referenced what we call Little Beach. And I'm offering pictures from 40 years ago and 20 and May of 2016, because honestly, this isn't, I believe, an issue of the split rail fence. It is an issue of the 40 feet diminishing to what amounts to about 15 feet. A beach that had a bench on it that was maintained by the town, that was taken out in 1980. There's a chronology of pictures. I have copies for you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any other comments from the board? Oh, go ahead.
Could I just?
Yep.
I believe Mr. Lamontina was the only board member here when we were here a few years ago. Oh, please forgive me, Mr. Hughes, yes. And I thank you for your volunteer service. This is a complicated matter. We have been asking to have this beach protected. As you can see in some of the pictures, the original, well, one of the split rail fences, when the renovation was done on the house and the basement was excavated, that basement sand and soil was dumped at the end of the land, and that created a pretty massive dune. The picture that I included from 1980 that shows the split rail fence has the previous owner's home and that dune. And now you can see May 2016, the original fence is covered. Perhaps part of the wind whistling up that area and blowing everything away is because that excavated soil is actually being blown out. In the second page, you can see sand that doesn't look to be sand, it looks like dirt. Because as that dune has eroded, you can see that dirt emerging. 20 years or so ago, Henry Marengi, may he rest in peace, came to town hall with a mason jar filled with dirt and a rusty nail or two and said, "This is on our beach. What will you do about it?" We feel that we must speak up to stop the disappearance of this beach. And I wish I had seen the decision in 2013. I am very troubled that a beautiful little beach is being destroyed and the fence is snaking along and taking more land when you can see there was a drastic change in that beach when the home was remodeled. So I am asking you to reconsider the multiple fences that are there that were allowed to be put in, and I am asking you to reconsider the importance of protecting that easement.
Thank you. Sure. Julie?
Amy, can I just ask you a question in general? In regard to the fence, would it be an improvement if, rather than the fence was there, it was beach grass or something else that would be more of a natural barrier to prevent people from climbing on the...
Well, the concern is that without the fence, and actually, I don't necessarily want to call this person out because they are here, but the owner is here. And without the fence, what they have witnessed happening to the natural vegetation that is there. So that is
Please speak at the mic only.
Okay, I was just wondering if a natural barrier, I mean, I don't think that beach grass is particularly easy to climb through.
I am a fan of, if anybody who knows me knows that I am a fan of natural as you can possibly make it.
Sure.
So in this situation, I didn't see this as being, I saw this as not being it may be a hindrance to other issues, but to conservation, I thought that this was a plus.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Peter?
I think, Amy, just while you're up there, Amy, if I could, I think the expectation was a 40-foot right-of-way, and kind of simplistic in this, but I think in most people's minds, that means 40 feet that's cleared, that I'll say is level, there's a boardwalk down the middle, and now it looks like over time
Yes.
that the sand is collecting on the east side, if you will, on the Fitzpatrick side of it all.
Yep.
And getting closer and closer and even encroaching on the walkway. And so I think one of the things we need to talk about is, is sand allowed to do that, if you will? What rights does the town have, if you will,
To remove it.
to
or
actually go in
whatever.
and remove that if we wanted to, and say, okay, here's
Yep.
a 40-foot right-of-way. It looks, I'm making this up, it looks like a
Yep.
sand road. In other words, it's level, as opposed to what it looks like now, which is, you got the walkway, and here comes the sand.
Sure. Just to note on that, I mean, if there was nothing there, if there was just sand there, period, not any vegetation, then that's something that is easier to do. But because the area has been, over the past 30 years or more, allowed to naturalize, once an area starts to naturalize, it starts to become under the protection of the state as well as the Harwich Local Wetlands Bylaw. So once vegetation, native and otherwise, starts to take hold on this landform, it becomes not necessarily that it's, I can't speak on behalf of the commission, it has to go in front of the Conservation Commission if there was to be an alteration to that area.
Okay, but are you saying, though, that over time, if the boardwalk, I'm being a little facetious, but the boardwalk became completely covered with sand, that the only remedy would be go back to the Conservation
No,
Commission?
being covered by sand is not the issue. It's the issue, what triggers conservation, it's all resource area, regardless. But when an area naturalizes with vegetation and becomes its actual landform, that's when it triggers conservation. This whole area is either beach, dune, or buffer zone 2 there, land subject to coastal storm flowage. It is conservation purview, but it's a lot easier to move sand when the area hasn't already been naturalized by natural vegetation.
All right, thank you.
In terms of regulatorily, I guess I should say.
Take one from Chris and one more from the public.
I was going to say, Mr. Chairman, I think a couple things tonight. I don't think a lot of the neighbors were aware of this 2013 agreement. I think there's probably should be fair opportunity for people to take a look at that. I think the board should look at the letters that we did receive, the 40 letters. And I also think it makes some sense to maybe have Amy go back and just take a look at what was submitted and what was constructed to make sure that it is compliant, and then to accumulate that information for the board. And then if the board thinks that it'd be worthwhile to hold a more formal public hearing, then I think at that stage, that probably makes sense. If the information comes back and, it was pursuant to the agreement, then I think the board needs to decide whether they want to provide information to the community to that effect or not.
Great, thank you, Chris.
Michael, a quickie, should we not ask Copeland and Page what power we actually have based on this?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind, the attorney who did that opinion is still with the firm, and I wouldn't mind get a better legal history to make sure that there was nothing in the mix that we missed.
Yeah, explain what is going on now.
Because just for the community, I think it's important that about 2 weeks ago is when we realized that these legal documents were out there. So this is something that was fairly new to us as well. So I'd like to have more of an opportunity to look into it.
Yeah, and they know what the question is, and we can find out what options we have.
Great.
Just a few quick points. Again, Gerard Elias from Pinewood Lane. I think everyone in this room would welcome the extent of the natural and humanly assisted accretion that has taken place with that dune in a decidedly western direction. That dune is growing. It is not losing ground at all. It is extending in a westerly direction, again, by nature and with the assistance of Mr. Fitzpatrick. And then secondly, Amy mentioned that it's preferable to have a zigzag pattern when constructing, whether it's snow fences or split rail fences. The split rail, while the snow dune fences are in a zigzag pattern that you referenced, and I think if you look at Mr. Laurie's pictures, you'll see that the split rail fence is in a half moon direction. So that's important.
Thank you, sir. One more comment.
Thank you.
I'm Dave Sadowski. I'm here from the Recreation and Youth Commission. I agree with most of what's been said here tonight, especially what Mr. McGowan had to say. That's my memory as well. I'm just considering, I was down there yesterday at the request of one of the neighbors and took a look, and I'm concerned about the height of that fence. I agree with that nice lady over there. It's not safe. I consider it a safety issue, and I think, you know, I would like to have the opportunity to discuss it with my board and have our director go down there and take a look at it himself. It's no more than 2 feet high. If you can see by the pictures, it's the 2 top rails of a split rail fence. That's as high as it is, and then if somebody trips over that, they're falling onto very sharp snow fence, as that lady pointed out. I consider it a safety issue, and I think we'd like to have a chance to ring in on it as well. Have our director go down there, and possibly members of our board. I think you should go down and take a look at it yourselves. It doesn't look very safe to me. The rest of it, I agree with Amy. Zigzag fencing, yes, it does help stabilize the dune, but that split rail fence, that's, to me, my opinion, is there to keep people out of there. It's not, and if you want to keep people off the dune, a higher fence would do it. This is down here. Go
Thank
take
you.
a look.
Thank you. Okay, we're going to take Chris's recommendations on this. We're going to review all the documents. I would encourage you to review the 2013 legal opinion. You can pick that up in the town administrator's office, or it is on the website.
It's on the website.
And then we will revisit this. I'm going to open this back up and let Mr. Fitzgerald say something. Fitzpatrick say something.
Dan Fitzpatrick, 43 Shore Road. I'm really up to try to answer any questions you might have. You raised the question about the conflict between 2 fences. In the 209 letter, both the Fitzpatricks and the Morris's property has a 3-rail fence there. And I think that's what they were talking about then. I don't think they had any idea about a split rail fence or what happened since then. So I think they're 2 separate issues. To answer the question this gentleman asked, I saw them put the fencing in. There's no concrete foundations.
Really?
The fence is just planted.
Wouldn't mind then if I go shovel the hole, check it out?
Well, I think that's something we got to talk to Conservation Commission about. I think that if the selectmen agree with me and this is settled, that within a few weeks it'll all be torn down anyway, because that's what happens to everything that goes there. And as far as a land grab is concerned, just for the record, we think we own that land. So to call it a land grab to us is offensive. That is our property. The town has a right of passage over it, but we own it. And I think everybody knows that. And there's been, heavens knows, enough lawyers, and I welcome you going to Koppelman again, because Koppelman has already stated that. If you have any questions that I can help clear up or confusion, I'd be happy to do so.
Thank you. We are going to bring this back, and we will have that opportunity. Thank you. Okay, on to the next. We're going to do submission of watershed compliance reports. David? Give him a minute to leave the mass exodus.
And I thought they were here for me.
Is that for him?
Always.
That is for him, yes.
Okay. Mr. Young? Mr. Young?
Thank you.
That's for you. It's yours if you want.
That's for me?
Someone borrowed it, they brought it back. Okay, so David Young from CDM Smith to discuss the submission of the watershed compliance reports.
Good evening, everybody. First off, congratulations on receiving the Mass Environmental Policy Act certificate on your comprehensive wastewater management plan. It was several years in the making, and several folks who were here in the room anyway, I think are still behind me.
There's no window.
We're part of the development of that program, as well as you folks were. So congratulations. And the reason I bring that up is that's really the basis for what you're submitting in the so-called watershed reports. In your packet were the drafts that we have prepared for 4 of the 5 watersheds that the reports are being submitted for, and that includes Herring River, and then Allen, Witchmere, and Saquatucket watersheds. The reason we combine those is the Mass Environmental, or the Mass Estuaries Project combine them in their reports, and that's where a lot of this information comes from, as well as the information that is in your comprehensive wastewater management plan. If I say anything that, I know there's a couple of you new tonight, if I say anything that you don't understand, feel free to ask me questions, by all means. So with that, the Cape Cod Commission, I think Mr. Neswicki is here, over the last couple years had prepared what's known as a 208 Water Quality Plan update. They were required to do that through EPA. 208 just refers to the section of the Federal Clean Water Act. And so they prepared that. The state of Massachusetts, the governor signed that a year ago, January. And one of the things that was required to, in that plan was to submit an update for each watershed by the wastewater treatment plant management authorities, of which I believe all 15 towns on the Cape designated their boards of selectmen to be those agencies known as WMAs. And so those reports are due a year from that plan acceptance, which is January of this year, so this month.
June.
June, excuse me.
Merry Christmas.
That was a test. And you all passed.
You have 4 weeks to get it done.
So the drafts are in front of you, were submitted to you in your packets. We also drafted a letter, should you choose to accept them tonight, authorizing Chris Clark to submit to the Cape Cod Commission on your behalf. As part of that letter, we just tried to, again, summarize a little bit of what I stated, why you're doing it, who is the agency authorized to submit that, being yourselves. Ultimately, you will, you've actually had hearings for what's known as the total maximum daily load permits that will be issued for each watershed. And what that designates, in this case, is the amount of nitrogen that can be discharged in that watershed, and that has all been determined in those Mass Estuaries project reports, the MEPs. And that amount of nitrogen has been determined to allow a healthy water environment, water quality environment to exist in those watersheds. So that's how much, anything over that, you need to remove. And that's what your whole comprehensive wastewater management plan addresses. So this summarizes the information that's in your, again, in your comprehensive wastewater management plan, and takes the data that's out of the MEP reports. And these are in a template format that the Cape Cod Commission created. We actually got the templates from the Commission. They had filled out some of the upfront informational facts. We verified those, revised a couple to match what was in the MEP reports, and then filled in the rest that, again, is in concert with your comprehensive wastewater management plan. So, I mean, I can go through in detail, but if you've had a chance to look at them, again, it's pretty straightforward with what's in the comprehensive plan. I'd be happy to answer any questions in that regard.
Thank you, David. Chris?
Michael, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, I had just a concern that in the material, the Pleasant Bay area was not part of the overall submission. And I think in terms of being compliant, is that the only one that was excluded from this submission, was Pleasant Bay? And could that be included in the submission?
Yes, my understanding at the time when we planned to do these, we asked the question, was discussed in one of the wastewater implementation committee meetings. Heinz Proft, who is your liaison to the Pleasant Bay Alliance, said he would look into it and got back and indicated that the Pleasant Bay Alliance was doing that on your behalf. So we did not do that plan. I believe they've submitted a memo to you. We have done a preliminary review. I got a copy. Have not had a chance to get into a lot of detail reviewing that revised submission. I know Carol Ridley is here tonight, who put a lot of work in helping to develop that. There's a lot of work to do that because it encompasses 4 communities within that watershed. But that was the reason why we focused on the other 4.
Thank you.
And just to be clear and make sure we're clear, the data that's in here, the numbers that are in here are consistent with the CWMP as regards to those 4 watersheds.
Correct.
Which 4 are you talking about?
Allen Harbor, Witchmere Harbor,
Okay.
Saugatucket Harbor, and Herring
They're
River.
Not Pleasant Bay.
I'm talking about what he submitted to
Okay.
us.
All right.
Great.
Just want to make sure we're consistent.
Any questions from the board? Chris?
Well, again, we did provide to the board, it was later this afternoon, what the agreement was. This agreement's been around for a while with the Pleasant Bay Alliance. And, it's clear, Article 2, each town participating in the alliance shall retain authority over the resources and activities within its jurisdiction. The alliance shall coordinate and not duplicate or compete with the functions of the existing regulatory or planning organizations in each of the undersigned towns. So I think it is important to have this be a town submission of all the different areas, and certainly an acknowledgement and I guess is really the acknowledgement that we do have this agreement, we are working with the alliance, but I think it needs to be a selectman submission as the Wastewater Treatment Management Authority, I think is the formal name of it.
Thank you, Chris.
And
Peter?
Mr. Chairman, I don't disagree with that. I guess my feeling was we're gonna agree with these numbers or whatever first. Hear from Carol on her submission, then circle back and figure out how it all comes together, I guess. Is the
Yeah,
way
I'd like to take the 2 of them separate. That way we can agree, exactly what you said.
Yeah.
Agree on this, and vote on this, and then we'll take Carol's, and David can be involved in that conversation as well. Any questions from the audience on these 4 watersheds and these reports? Okay, can I get a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the watershed or wastewater management, watershed reports for Allen Harbor, Witchmere Harbor, Saugatucket Harbor, and the Herring River as prepared and submitted to us by CDM Smith.
Second.
Any discussion from the board? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The second part of that was to the letter to authorize the filing, correct? Or is that part of that, will that cover it in that motion?
Yeah, it was just a logistical thing that, we had drafted a letter that instead of you all having to sign it and this and that you were really just authorizing Chris to file it on your behalf. So
that was part of my motion.
Okay. All set.
I
Great.
second that part, too.
Okay. Okay, so now let's bring up the draft letter from Pleasant Bay Alliance to the Cape Cod Commission regarding the Pleasant Bay watershed.
Sure.
Carol?
Good evening.
Good evening.
Carol Ridley, Coordinator for the Pleasant Bay Alliance. And I guess there are a couple of documents before you this evening, and I thought I would take just a quick few minutes to provide a little bit of background, especially for new members on the board and also for folks who might be listening out in the audience. So first of all, the Pleasant Bay Alliance is the organization formed by the towns of Orleans, Harwich, Chatham, and Brewster, which are the 4 towns that share the Pleasant Bay watershed. And Mr. Clark, I'm glad you brought that up, he read from the document, which is the intermunicipal agreement, which is signed by each of our member towns' boards of selectmen on a 5-year basis. So we develop a management plan that is presented to town meeting in each of the member towns, along with a renewal of the memorandum of agreement. This happens every 5 years. So the last time that happened was in 2013. So our management plan is actually approved by 4 towns every time, every 4 years. And that agreement is reauthorized on a 5-year basis. That plan is then sent to the state Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs for approval. So it's a fairly well-vetted plan in terms of the communities that are a part of the alliance as well as state environmental agencies. And a key component of that resource management plan, which is fairly comprehensive in the number of issues it addresses, its focus, its purpose, and the reason the alliance was formed was to foster intermunicipal coordination on the shared resources of Pleasant Bay. And I like to congratulate the towns, frankly, because this all happened in the mid-90s, well before watersheds and regional cooperation and all of that were buzzwords. The towns had the foresight to recognize the importance of collaborating on a watershed basis. So we've been doing this work for, as I say, close to 2 decades. And obviously a key issue from the very, very beginning of our work has been understanding and addressing nutrient loading in Pleasant Bay as the #1 threat to the health of resources in the whole system. So we do this work. We have a steering committee. You appoint members to that steering committee, as do the other boards of selectmen. We also have a technical resource committee, and you appoint those members from Harwich as well, as do your colleagues in the other towns. We have a series of issue-oriented work groups, and the one that's most relevant this evening is our watershed work group, which is where all of the collaborative work around nutrient management planning happens. Heinz has been representing the town on your behalf at that work group. His colleagues, who are also the point people in the staffs of the other towns on watershed planning, wastewater planning, attend this meeting, as do in many cases technical consultants. I know Dave has attended many of our meetings, and the technical consultants from the other member towns do as well. We have regular participation from Brian Dudley with Mass DEP. We've had folks from the commission participate in many of our meetings. We have selectmen attend from time to time. So it's a very knowledgeable group, and a group that is really in tune with what each individual town is doing and seeking to do in their priorities, but also bringing that to a regional discussion. So we've done a lot of work in this group through our water quality monitoring program. We helped coordinate the whole estuaries project, which is the underpinnings of all of the work that the towns are doing on their wastewater planning. We've also generated a lot of data that's led to specific projects, like the Muddy Creek project. It was the alliance that did all of the groundwork, if you will, and the initial studies that led to that project, which has obvious restoration benefits, but is actually also the first nutrient management project in the Pleasant Bay watershed. So, so we have a lot of track record here. And in the last, I'd say, year and a half, with the development of the 208 plan and the increased emphasis that DEP has put on watershed planning, and the fact that the 4 towns all had reached a point, which hadn't been the case in the past, but all the towns had reached a point where their plans had pretty much gelled to one degree or another. In some cases, obviously, Chatham is implementing their plan. Harwich had developed its plan. Orleans had made great progress, as had Orleans. So we were at a point where we could actually take the pieces of your individual town plans that pertain to Pleasant Bay and put them together and see what that looked like on a watershed basis. And this was happening at the same time and in the context of the whole 208 process. We have done that work. We have pulled those 4 town plans together. And we've done this with the assistance of Wright Pierce, which is an engineering firm that has worked for a number of towns, including Harwich, I think, in years past. And that work is really what's represented in the watershed report that is in your packet this evening. Now, that watershed report, as Dave had mentioned, we communicated to make sure he wasn't preparing a report on your behalf in this regard, so there would be no duplication of efforts. And what that report essentially does is it takes the data from the Harwich Comprehensive Plan and the similar plans in the other towns and just simply pulls it all together. So our consultant on behalf of the Alliance has been in touch with Dave and his counterparts to make sure that everybody's understanding what the numbers are. So in that sense, it's comparable to what you were seeing for the other watersheds in Harwich. That is all it really is. It pulls what the plan says for Pleasant Bay together with what the other 3 towns' plans for Pleasant Bay say. And what we found in doing this is a couple of things that I think are noteworthy. One is when you pull the 4 towns together, 4 town plans together, the TMDLs for Pleasant Bay are met, which is significant. So those are the thresholds that everybody's working toward. The other significant finding is that roughly 30% of the measures that are proposed, collectively by the towns constitute non-traditional measures. So in that sense, it really is on a watershed basis a hybrid plan that contains proposals for traditional sewering types of approaches, but also a lot of non-traditional approaches that don't require sewering infrastructure. So in that sense, I think the idea of it being a hybrid plan is significant. But what we also see very initially is on a sub-watershed basis, which is how the planning happens, there are, we think, potential opportunities for efficiencies. So part of our effort was to look for any areas where there might be gaps, and maybe too much was being done to remove nitrogen, or potentially where there might be, gaps would be where there wasn't enough, or overlaps where there might be too much happening to remove nitrogen. And in that process, the next step would be to suggest recommendations for adaptive management or measures that could, tweak or adjust plans. Again, recommendations to the towns to pursue negotiations with another town, a joint project such as the Muddy Creek Bridge. Those decisions would rest with you and your colleagues in the other towns. So this report, as the ones earlier, is presented to you. It's a draft. It's for you to determine whether you will submit it to the Cape Cod Commission to meet your requirement under 208. That is your decision. But as the group that's been coordinating watershed planning for the 4 watershed towns of Pleasant Bay, we saw that as our responsibility and our charge to provide you and your colleagues in the other towns with that report. So I can stop there, but I can also address the other document that you have before you.
Why don't you go ahead and address
Okay,
that?
why don't I do that? So, you have correspondence in your file that actually was submitted a couple of weeks ago, and we decided to hold this meeting at the same time the other watershed reports were being submitted, because it seemed like it would make a more efficient discussion. So in the process we undertook over the past year of pulling the 4 town Pleasant Bay component pieces together, we held several meetings with the Cape Cod Commission to explore the applicability of the watershed decision tools that are available through the 208 process. What we found in that process is, at the point we were at, a sense of the watershed work group that there were questions about some of the analysis that was generated by the tools. Now, it's important to note that some of the data the Commission is offering is more current, although I will note that the analysis that's represented in the report you have includes, for Harwich, 2010 attenuation, water use, and land use data that was generated as part of the whole Muddy Creek project. So that's fairly up to date. So that is incorporated in what you have. But I think there were questions about the applicability of those tools, and a sense that the scale of analysis was more appropriately addressed through the engineering plans that the towns already had generated. And I don't know that we need to get into a lot of details about it, but there was a lack of consensus that those tools were the appropriate approach for developing this watershed report. As is noted in the cover note to you, I think the Alliance is eager to continue to explore ways to work with those decision tools, but at the time of putting this report together, that level of comfort was not there. I think it's really reflecting where this particular watershed is in the stage of planning. It's not an early stage of planning. It's at a fairly advanced stage of planning, given what the towns have done and invested in. And so that's our recommendation to you this evening. And frankly, it's very comparable to the type of analysis that's represented, I believe, in the other reports from CDM Smith.
Great. Thank you, Carol. Peter?
Could I just ask one or both of you, the numbers that are in your version of the Pleasant Bay report, are they consistent with what we have in the CWMP for Pleasant Bay, the Harwich segment of it?
Yes.
Yeah, Carol had sent us a draft to look at a couple of weeks ago, and actually we'd seen an earlier draft back probably 3 months ago from Mike Gigi at Wright Pierce, who's doing the work for them. We had some questions on some of those numbers. I think we pretty much came to an agreement of why some of the numbers were a little different. What it really boils down to is all your comprehensive wastewater management plan numbers we've done on so-called build-out analysis, because that's what you're going to need to meet, versus a lot of the data presented in the report that's been prepared now is based on existing conditions. And so we've been wrestling with how to refine those, because we didn't do existing conditions and present that in the CWMP, quite frankly. We didn't feel there was a need to do that. And then we've had discussions going back and forth about how, and I'll give you the example because it relates to Pleasant Bay. In Pleasant Bay, you were removing enough nitrogen to meet the TMDLs, but you're also removing enough nitrogen to meet some of your economic development interest. And you're also removing enough nitrogen so you can recharge treated effluent back in that watershed should you have to do that. So you have a couple other layers over and above just taking out nitrogen to meet the TMDLs. So it's been a little bit of a apple and orange type of analysis that we've been going back and forth with, and I just saw the most recent numbers, and I think we're pretty close. I have a couple minor questions that I'm sure a phone call to Mike we can resolve, but.
I'll just ask you directly, if I could, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
If you had to put the Pleasant Bay watershed into the same format you've done all the others, because my understanding is that's the format the commission has asked for, right?
Well, I think
would you be
Carol's
able to-
plan essentially does that because it's all a standard template that the Cape Cod Commission has done. It looks a little different because there's 4 towns that have been aggregated into one report versus, 3 of your watersheds are all within Harwich.
Okay, just looks different to me.
That's why,
I mean,
yes.
Yeah, okay, but.
So they've done a lot more table format and some other things just to try to consolidate some of the data. But the information itself is essentially the same.
Okay, do you have a preference as to whether, the Pleasant Bay watershed is submitted based on their report or a format that you might propose, or something you would do?
Again, I think it's similar format or just about the same format because it's dictated by the Cape Cod Commission's template.
Okay.
I guess the only question you folks need to answer is, are you submitting the report to the Cape Cod Commission from a report that the Pleasant Bay Alliance is providing to you?
Well, part of me says that we do a Harwich segment of it. It's just me thinking out loud because we're doing Harwich for all the others. And then you attach this as an addendum or something that says, well, okay, by the way, there are other towns involved.
Yeah, I think the commission's looking for watershed reports that addresses each town in that watershed. That's why it's watershed-based.
Right.
And even your Herring River, we address some information on Brewster and some information on Dennis because they're both included in the Herring River, even though you have, 95% of it.
Sure.
Angela?
I think I agree with what I think you're saying. I think we need to submit a report that has all of the Harwich areas in one place. And if there's a decision to put the 4 towns together, that's fine too. But I think we need to do a job for all of our estuaries, not just one. In other words, it's kind of strange. The first place we're working effectively is in East Harwich. I think we need to turn that report in rather than dangling it. And I would just prefer that it's consistent with what that document is.
Well, I think in that regard, it will be consistent with what's in that document.
Well, then let's pull it out and put it in with our document, that's all. I think we should be submitting it, is what I'm saying.
Carol?
Just to clarify, there's never been a thought other than that you would submit the report. And I think the question is, how is it packaged? And so I think we've established a couple of things. One, that the objective is to look on a watershed basis. So that, in this instance, means the 4 communities. The second is, the information, you have to have a level of comfort that information is what's in your CWMP. And I think that's what Dave is conveying. Maybe there's a question or two that could be quickly resolved. So that report, the Harwich component of it, would be consistent with what you have in your CWMP. So again, your report to submit and your level of comfort that the data in it reflects what you have in your CWMP.
I'm kind of agreeing with you, but I want the report on Harwich to be part of the Harwich document. It could be the part that you've written that deals with Harwich.
David?
But I believe what the commission, Angelo, is requesting is that it be submitted on a watershed basis for all 4 towns. So what you could submit as part of your letter is that you're only submitting the information in there that's for Harwich, but it's part of that overall package still.
That's fine.
Yeah.
as long as that's
Yeah,
there.
I think that's what you're getting at, but it wouldn't be a separate Harwich submittal for Pleasant Bay watershed.
No, I understand it.
Okay.
That's where I'm going.
Okay.
So we have a place that you can look up Harwich.
So all you're doing is submitting and clarifying, you're submitting the Harwich data as part of the Pleasant Bay watershed report.
Chris?
Just to that point, though, David, the Herring River has 3 towns that contribute to that, and we're submitting our component in the Herring River, so as our part of our report. So I think it would be a little inconsistent to then do something different in Pleasant Bay.
Well, no, the Herring River report describes Brewster and Dennis, but
But it's going to be in our submission and
Yes.
referencing their activities.
yes.
Right, that's
So it
gonna-
includes all 3 towns in that submission.
And then the second, I've been in the business of working with regulators for a long time, and being compliant with regulators is always, I think, a key component to having a successful submission. And there was a little bit of a flurry of activity where the commission didn't agree, I guess, with the methodology that the Pleasant Bay Alliance was using. Is that gonna cause the town to kind of run afoul of something by submitting information that's potentially inconsistent with the commission? Or can you comment on that component?
I think what you need to submit data on is that you're meeting the TMDL. It doesn't matter where the information came from or how it's calculated. You have to submit information that you're going to meet those total max daily loads. And that's really developed and came out of the MEP reports. I haven't been involved in all the other discussions.
Well, and I just want to, reiterate that what's in that report is simply what each town plan has in their report. So we haven't,
Which comes from the MEPs.
right. Actually MEPs, and then each town modified a little bit. I mean, there were little tweaks, the updated attenuation data for Muddy Creek and things like that. So there were little changes. So it was really a question of taking the MEP data and then each town's data and pulling that all together. So there was no further analysis.
Well, I'd like to add, too, that the memorandum of understanding between Pleasant Bay Alliance and the town, as well as Carol's proposed letter to the commission, the Pleasant Bay Alliance is the town of Harwich, and it belongs to 3 other towns. How can we separate out the work that's been done? And in the letter, it specifies there's no boundaries in the bay. Has the commission weighed in, or maybe Paul can weigh in? If all 4 towns accept this and submit it together, it is in fact the town submitting it together. And as far as the comment about Herring River, we're not to the same level. We don't have an alliance for Herring River yet. And at some point, I guess Wastewater Implementation Committee weighed in on this and most likely voted to have, I think I heard at the beginning of the conversation, to have Pleasant Bay Alliance do this watershed for the town. So I'm not sure that it's not the town filing the report.
Have any of the other towns looked at this yet?
Well, you were actually the first to receive it. It was just finished last week. So I will be meeting in Orleans on Wednesday to discuss it.
And we're all under the same deadline, right, at the end of the month?
Correct.
Everybody is, right?
I think it would be very important to us to have all the other 3 towns agree on this or not submit it that way. And I don't want to put Paul on the spot, but does Paul have any comments on this?
I haven't really seen the watershed reports. They're in front of you for your consideration tonight, then they'll be forwarded to us. What's happened in the other watersheds are that the towns are the WMAs. You're the responsible party. You have the capacity, and you submit a report or a plan based on the jurisdiction that you have authority over, and then we put those plans together and share watersheds.
In this unique circumstance where we have an alliance and we have 4 towns that share a watershed, and we started to work together a long time ago, and we've come to this place. I mean, obviously, you can't gauge everybody else based on that. Is this acceptable or something you'll look at? Do you have an opinion on it?
I haven't seen it. I mean, it's available in your packet. I've taken a quick look at it. If you file it this way in a bifurcated way, then, you know, a vote by the Board of Selectmen confirming any sort of report is going to carry a lot of weight. So my larger question is how it impacts the review of your comprehensive wastewater management plan, which is in front of the commission for consideration right now. So if it's voted for, then it will be added to that plan as we consider it. And if it's consistent, then I guess there's no problem. If it's not, then we're going to have another discussion.
Can I just ask you, Mr. Chairman, so Paul, you're saying if we submitted this Pleasant Bay watershed report with the other watersheds, when you're reviewing our document, CWMP, would you just take the Harwich portion of this Pleasant Bay?
Yes.
And just work that versus what's in the book?
Yeah, we would compare the watershed report because it reflects a vote of the Board of Selectmen. So I would have to assume that you agree with everything that's contained within that report as it pertains to Harwich.
Yeah.
So if that's consistent with your submittal on the whole town, including that piece as part of your CWMP, then there isn't an issue. But you're going to have two votes of this board on two different plans on one geography.
I understand.
So that is, as it relates to the watershed reports, that's where my concern would be.
And I think, Mr. Chairman, that's why we're asking the question to David about, you know, is this Pleasant Bay watershed plan, the Harwich part, consistent with what's in the book? And I guess there's still some issue or discussion has to take place.
Yeah, again, I think it's just clarifications. It's not that it's necessarily inconsistent. We just need to clarify, again, between the existing conditions and what we've used for build-out to make sure when you back into the existing that it's the same as has been generated and presented.
And so I recommend, Mr. Chairman, that we task David with determining that consistency, if you will, and then come back to us, and if it is consistent, then I think there's no, in my mind, there's no problem submitting it. If it's not, then we have a discussion, I believe.
Okay, thank you. Angela?
I think we're doing it backwards. I think, excuse me, that David, sorry, that David should prepare the Harwich piece based on that, and you share it with the Pleasant Bay group, and they can certainly use it as the Harwich piece to go in with the other three towns. And I think that's the way you do it. Otherwise, what we're having is that plan and put on top of this, and I don't care if only one number is different. We can't afford to give a document to the county that has even one or two numbers different than that, because that's going to create problems in the future. So I don't know what's so difficult about it. If they're so close and whatnot, just do it. You do it this way. And by the way, should there be a plan submitted for all four towns? Sure. I think it would be fun for people to take a look at. But I think you need it by town. And that's the way the county just said they expected it. So let's do it.
Carol?
So my understanding is that the important thing here is that we're moving toward a watershed approach. We've worked very hard, and I, by all means, this is submitted as a draft, and we tried to get it to you as early as possible so that you would have time to review it and go through it, every number of it, and comment and make changes as you see fit. But I would urge you to consider maintaining the integrity of the watershed document, because that's the whole idea. That's what's new here, because that's what we're moving away from, you know, political boundaries that are superimposed on natural resources. We're moving toward an understanding that we need to work collaboratively, but respecting each town's priorities and issues, and that's what we've worked very hard to do. I welcome Dave's and any one of you, your review of this, and would urge you to make the changes you see fit, but I would urge you to maintain the integrity of the watershed document and submit that along with your other shared watersheds.
Paul?
Yeah, just as an example, and it's the first time I'm really taking a look at it, but on page 3 of the Pleasant Bay Alliance report, it looks at the amount of nitrogen removal on a town-by-town basis, on a sub-embayment basis as required by 208. and it shows Brewster is not removing enough to meet water quality standards based on their percentage allocation. It shows one sub-embayment in Harwich that is not removing enough nitrogen too. The other towns collectively are removing more in some of those sub-embayments. So that might be okay if there's a binding agreement between those 4 towns about how they're going to move forward with these plans. Without that agreement, certifying these town plans independently as being consistent with 208 is not possible.
Thank you. David, you had a comment? Did you have a comment?
Well, no, I was just going to add that I don't think there was ever any intent to not resolve these numbers and get this correct and put it in, whether it's a document created by the Pleasant Bay Alliance or a document created by CDM Smith. We'll get those numbers resolved, and it'll be consistent with what's in the CWMP, regardless of who generates the overall document.
Thank you. Mr. Koukounis?
You guys dizzy yet up there? Because I am. I'm going to try just give you a little bit of perspective from someone who doesn't have a pony in this race, other than the fact that I'm a resident and a taxpayer, and this is going to be an issue that I'm going to be facing and my family's going to be facing for years to come. On the surface, it's been really the position of most everyone that I've run into and asked about this on a simple basis. What do you want? And they all have responded that we want to have each individual town be their wastewater management authority. Their biggest fear is, and I know Paul will attest to this because he and I have attended many meetings together, is that there's going to somehow create some wastewater authority which is going to encompass a number of towns. On a personal basis, I have a problem with a lot of the things that we do in government. We seem to have a lot of people doing a lot of the same thing and basically generating a lot of the same information, yet the taxpayer at the end really is getting nothing. You know, we have a Pleasant Bay Alliance that does a lot of work. We have a wastewater collaborative that does a lot of work through the county. We have David Young's company that we've been paying a lot of money to, and we all seem to be, you know, trying to strive for the same thing. I'm standing up here tonight to ask you people not to include the Alliance documentation or report, to go with what the residents of the town asked you to do, and that's be a wastewater authority for us, to go with Mr. Young's report, because he's the one, we paid him to make a report for the town of Harwich. I certainly have no problem with him being requested to look at numbers to make sure that they are consistent or equal to the Alliance's work. That's basically common sense, and I think Mr. Young probably has done that and will be willing to do that. But I'm really going to stand here and ask you to submit one report that we paid a lot of money to have done by Mr. Young, and it's near completion already. It's probably in alliance with our general plan that the commission is already reviewing. And I know that we are under a huge time frame. I mean, we're talking a June 30th filing date. So this is a lot of information and a lot of documentation that we're looking at, and some really, really important decisions. And I think to make this June's filing date, that it would behoove you to file one report, get it on file. It can always be amended. And then, as Paul so eloquently put, you know, if you want to go down the road of a wastewater authority for a certain section of Harwich, Orleans, Chatham, and Brewster, then by all means send it up to Flagpole and see if you're going to get any support from it. Personally, I don't think you will. I think all the towns have spoken that they want to be their wastewater authorities, and they want to submit their plans for the watersheds in their towns, taking into consideration the neighboring towns with anything they may be adding or taking out of. So, you know, government is weird. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money doing a lot of things, and it seems like we get very little done. So, thank you.
Carol?
I just want to reply to a couple of points that Mr. Koukounis made, because I don't want anyone to leave this room with a misimpression of what the Alliance's work has been about. We've never represented the Alliance as a WMA, and we've made it very, very clear that that is each member town's role. We work in support of your role as a WMA. The information submitted to you this evening is submitted in that regard. And it is your work. It has been taken from your CWMP. And the fact of the matter is, the way we have gone about this in coordinating with Dave and Hines and the committee is to avoid duplication of effort. So we were very clear not to be both writing reports that would be competing, but to be collaborating so that, you know, all of the ground was covered, and including the information that needed to be included and vetted in the way it needed to be vetted. So this is the suggestion that this is leading toward or in any way suggestive of a watershed authority, I think is a misrepresentation of what's been presented to you. We're presenting you information for your decision making, and that's solely it. Thank you.
Well,
We got one comment back here.
Kathleen Tian, 3 Pleasant Avenue. And I would just like to say, as we have this Clean Water Act, it's to impact all of our health and well-being, our fisheries, and a lot of things need to be done collaboratively and together. When we were looking at prohibiting smoking in Massachusetts, and some of the restaurants had a non-smoking section and a smoking section, well, the smoke came over to the non-smoking section. People were still breathing in all the pollutants. If we have our town doing one thing, the other towns doing other things, and it's not really cleaning up that area, it doesn't make sense. To have 2 experts here who have worked on this and saying that they can work it out so that the language makes sense and so that the reports will be accepted, to me makes sense. And so I would ask you to please let the experts do what they've been doing and to work collaboratively, because I think that more and more we see how our country isn't working too well collaboratively, and we'd all be a lot better off if we did that. Thank you.
Thank you.
I just, one final comment, I guess, from me, just on page 2 of the draft. And I recognize that it is a draft, but, you know, it specifically points out the Alliance has identified a number of questions that suggest the Commission's multivariate planner tool used by the watershed team is not the appropriate tool for the level of assessment currently being undertaken in Pleasant Bay watershed. It just seems that the language of that just seems contradictory to what we're trying to submit. And I guess that paragraph should be reworked to show that we are going to be compliant with the material that we're supposed to be compliant with. We may have disagreements about ultimately the final refinement of the numbers, but I just, that paragraph just strikes to me that we don't agree with the Commission's intent and we want to do something different.
Are you looking at the letter, Mr. Clark?
Yeah, the letter that,
Right.
the
So,
draft.
so
And I know it's draft, so I'm just raising that as a red flag when I went through it, I guess, from my
okay.
standpoint.
I was addressing my comments to the draft report.
Okay, sorry.
Angela?
I have a very simple problem. We'll submit a document. It'll get to the county. And let's say the county has a question or wants something changed or something done. Who are they going to address that question to? They will address the question to whoever document it is. And I want it addressed to him or to you. And then we can address it to, or include it with the Pleasant Bay Alliance stuff. I think we're creating a monster is what we're doing, which is unnecessary. Because you take the document, everybody seems to be in agreement that the document is basically the same. Fine, so we take our document and put it in the document with the other 3 towns. That's fine. So it depends on where you start. And I don't really think, we cannot be accused by anybody of not cooperating with other towns, because what's going on in that area is kind of an agreement with working with another town. We've already demonstrated that we've done that. So that can't be the issue. And I just find it very difficult to change that. That's all.
Given the wastewater implementation committee didn't include this one for the reports that you did, what would it take for you to do a report for the town of Harwich at this point off of that? And then the only other comment that, Paul raises a good point. We don't have those agreements with Chatham, Brewster, and Orleans made. Carol, do you have a thought on, I think he's right in the sense that Brewster could come back and say, no, we don't want to do that. Or Orleans could come back and say, no, we're not going to do that. Therefore, the report's not accurate to our CWMP.
Well, my understanding of the purpose of the report was to report. It's not a plan, it's a report on what each town is doing and where they are in the process. So if you were representing this as a plan, perhaps, but again, that's, I don't know what the Commission's regulatory treatment of these reports is going to be. That's been a question, frankly. What the regulatory treatment of the reports is going to be, what the regulatory criteria are for compliance with 208. These are questions. And so, as Dave did with his reports, we followed the template, we pulled together the information, and presented to you. So it's not represented as a plan, it's represented as a report.
Okay, so now to David, to change this and to do our own report and submit it on the June 30th deadline, is that possible?
The information is the same. Whether I'm going to produce it or whether Carol's group has already produced it, right now 95% of the information will be exactly the same. The question or the comment that Mr. Nedzwicki made is the question that we actually have back on the data that's being used. And again, we had used build-out values, and that's being reported based on existing condition values. So we think there's something that's been missed in going from build-out back into existing and saying that in that one sub-watershed, Harwich hasn't removed enough. So that's the only remaining question that we have that has to be resolved. Other than that, the information would be exactly the same, category by category by category.
But even if that were the case, the author of the document would be different, and that can't be changed once it gets out. Okay?
Peter?
Mr. Chairman, could I ask through you, David, if we said to you, take what's in that document, take what Pleasant Bay Alliance has done, and for the Harwich section of Pleasant Bay, add it as the next watershed in here, your report, your format specifically, your fonts, your whatever, so it's all consistent. Could we have that back to us next week? Is that possible?
We would certainly try. I'd have to check with the staff that have been doing all this for me and stuff, but we would certainly try.
And if it can be right
I
back
mean,
to us
again,
next week.
95% of it is already done.
I understand.
Yeah.
It's a matter of formatting it, and I mean that in the sense of putting it in the document.
And just to be clear, you actually have two watershed reports in front of you. One is for Herring River, and one is for Allen, Witchmere, and Saquatucket. So we would be adding a third. The question we need to resolve is whether we're including all the Chatham, Orleans, and Brewster information, because it's supposed to be submitted on a watershed basis to the commission. All you're certifying is the Harwich information.
Exactly.
As that part.
Yep.
That's all.
Carol?
So, this report was never intended to be submitted as the Alliance's report. It's meant to be incorporated into your reports, but as the entire watershed. So that's the point, though, that it's the entire watershed and all four components of it. But it is part of your report, as it will be parts of the other towns' reports.
Can I ask a question? So that's one piece for me that I'm trying to clarify, and forgive me if I am new, but with the other reports, we're dealing with being able to sort of break it down town, in terms of Herring River, for instance. And then when we get to Pleasant Bay, we're not going to be able to break it down as precisely. Is that correct? I'm just trying to understand it. So in other words, are we looking at the Pleasant Bay report will be cumulative, whereas we're able to take the other reports and say, this portion Dennis, this portion Brewster, and is the commission going to have a problem with that overall?
The Pleasant Bay is much more complex because it's got the 4 communities, and they all have varying percentages of contribution to Pleasant Bay. Herring River, there's like 1% in Dennis and
Right.
less than 10% in Brewster, and so the solution to meeting the nitrogen is Dennis is taking care of that 1%, and Harwich is taking care of the rest, but then to have discussions with Brewster about their contribution. But that's very small because it comes through a lot of freshwater ponds, which attenuates the nitrogen. Over here, and the other 3 are all totally within Harwich. So it's really 2 totally different cases in terms of putting the report together.
But we can't make commitments for other towns, just like they can't for us. So what we're talking about here is, what's the plan for the Harwich taxpayers who are gonna bear the burden of
Right,
doing
yeah,
this?
right.
And what can we, as the, you know, the wastewater management district, whatever, what can we control? And it's Harwich.
But to answer your
Right,
question.
but it's-
Yeah, but to answer your question, I believe yes, it's broken out by sub-watershed and for each sub-watershed by town. So you can tell for each Muddy Creek, for example, or the
Okay.
other sub-watersheds, which is Harwich and which is Chatham.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's really was my question. Thank you.
So, but if Dave did that document and made sure that you had a copy of it, so you could include it as part of your Harwich piece, then we'd have both our document just for the town of Harwich, and there would be a document for all the towns. Right?
Well, for the entire Pleasant Bay
And the only, and I think Peter's absolutely correct, the only people we can vote positively for or negatively is Harwich. We can't tie into anything else. So I think we have to go down that path. If we could go vote for other people, it would be terrific. It'd save us a lot of money.
Okay. Anything from anyone in the public? What's the
Mr. Chairman, I just think we
Alan
need to
Tonk.
clear the air. Carol and I have been serving on the Pleasant Bay Alliance for some 20-plus years. And the boards of selectmen in each of those towns are the ones that created this. They voted us in to be a non-regulatory group. We work for the towns, we support the towns, we manage the bay, but it's all done by vote of the towns. We have no authority. And to misconstrue this as we're having authority or taking over wastewater management, by no means is it all happening. The commission came up with a 208 plan that they were going to operate on a watershed basis. The idea came up we manage the Pleasant Bay, why not take a look at the Pleasant Bay, all 4 towns? And what's been put together, and Carol and all the players here have put a lot of effort into this, to come up with what each portion of what each town is responsible for. But Chatham is easy because they're suing the whole town. There's no issue. Brewster is still working on a plan. Orleans has a plan, but it didn't go anywhere. They've reworked the plan. But meanwhile, the TMDLs are still the same or have grown because of the growth of the communities. But in no way are we taking over anything. And as Carol said, and I think she put it very clear, we're offering you this information as a watershed, as proposed by the commission in the 208 plan, a watershed plan. And that's what we're doing as far as the wastewater implementation committee, watershed plans for the harbors, and again, Dennis and Brewster and Herring River. So all in all, I think the effort that's put in, if there's differences, we're in a draft stage. We can put it together and resolve any issues with it, come back and finalize it before the end of the month and move ahead. You know, I think it's a very positive action. We put a lot of time in it, had a lot of meetings, and we're going to talk to all 4 towns. So, and again, we're strictly on a helping basis as a management item for the bay.
Janelle?
As Peter said a while ago, can we just simply have CDM Smith submit the one report with an addendum by Pleasant Bay Alliance and call it a day? Can we just do that? It seems like a logical explanation. Therefore, your work is not in vain, Carol, and your committee, and we're submitting one report to the commission for ease of operation.
But the reports are not the same.
But
That's
they can be the
difference.
same.
Sure, that's what we've been talking about. If they're made to be the same, then it's not a problem. Then what you're suggesting is not a problem at all. But they have to be made the same. So it has to be the report that would be written based on that. If the Alliance were willing to accept that as for Harwich, for Harwich's portion, then it's fine. And then you could do that very, very well, not a problem. Although we couldn't guarantee anything for the other towns that we were putting in, could we?
Well, you know, I don't see the Alliance, the Alliance represents us, but we are tasked with filing our own watershed report. And that's where I think that this gets a bit lost. And I think to Paul's point, we can't represent that those deals can be made with the other towns. So that's my confusion. Not that the Alliance is trying to do anything besides represent the towns. And we are using information that's been provided from them. They're using the information right out of our report, so it is the same information. So the question is, do we put Harwich, Brewster, Orleans, or Chatham, or do we just put Harwich in it with the same information, file our own report, satisfy the commission, and continue to work with the 4 towns to manage the watershed? But
Yes.
Well, and by the way, for the report on the 4 towns in the watershed, as long as the data was consistent, even after the fact, I would think we would sign on to that as a collective group saying this is a good idea. But our plan stands on its own, which is that document.
Carol?
I mean, on this question of agreements, at this stage, I wonder if there is any shared watershed on Cape Cod that would have an agreement between municipalities to guarantee what each is doing in their own watershed plan. I mean, I think this is where we are at this stage. Those agreements don't exist, just as you probably don't have agreements with Dennis or Brewster for what you're representing with the other shared watersheds.
Mm-hmm.
So again, this is a report, and I think when things are at more of a plan stage, perhaps those agreements are more
Yeah,
pressing.
I would say probably not, but I would hate to have our plan kicked back to us because of a technicality. Or
I think there's a little misunderstanding about those agreements, and I don't want to put words in Mr. Neswicki's mouth, but I think he was referring to the comment that in one sub-watershed, it was reported that Harwich wasn't removing enough nitrogen, but yet the 4 towns were meeting the TMDL in that sub-watershed. So you didn't have an agreement with the other communities to make up your share. I think that's the agreement he was referring to. We still have the question of, we believe you're removing a sufficient amount of nitrogen, so we still need to clarify that information. I don't think as Carol says, I don't think any community has a formal written agreement that someone's removing 49% nitrogen and the other one's removing 51% nitrogen.
Peter?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Peter DeBacher, as the chair of the Wastewater Implementation Committee. A couple of thoughts. I think we need to stay focused, at least that's my task, to stay focused on this program. We have submitted the CWMP. It has been approved by the state of Massachusetts. So it has gone out of that, through that gate. It is now into the hands of the Cape Cod Commission. I think we need to realize that this thing is steaming forward quite nicely on the basis of the research we have done as the Wastewater Implementation Committee, with input from all the town committees, boards, planning boards, what have we. My point is there is a document here that is well researched. It is a Harwich document. It has moved forward very nicely with the approvals and knowledge of just about everybody who's been involved in it. I think we should keep it a Harwich document. I think we should certainly formulate our next step in such a way that it will meet the approval of the Cape Cod Commission. And I hear the various entities that have some input in this. I applaud the efforts by the Pleasant Bay Lions. Wonderful, but I think our input should be the driver as to what ought to go in the Pleasant Bay Lions document. So from my point of view, as the chair of the Wastewater Implementation Committee, my suggestion is, my focus is, what's in that document should be the driver, and we can negotiate how, as a secondary entity, and I don't mean on a secondary level, but an additional entity, they can use that information to make the 4 townships input mesh properly.
Thank you. Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
Mr. Chairman, I'd make a motion that we direct David Young and CDM Smith to revise his watershed report that he's done so far to include the Harwich portion of the Pleasant Bay watershed. Make sure the numbers are consistent with what we have in our CWMP and bring it back to the board or for our approval for submission to the Cape Cod Commission.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to instruct CDM Smith to create a watershed report for Pleasant Bay, the Harwich portion of the Pleasant Bay watershed. Any discussion?
Nope.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
On to the next, E, amend the personnel bylaw plan for FY 2017 in keeping with the union increases. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just last week, we did have this on the agenda. We didn't have a couple of the items that the board had voted over the last 6 months, so those items have been addressed. This is to allow for non-union personnel to receive a 2% cost of living adjustment consistent with the union increases of a similar amount amongst the various collective bargaining units.
Anyone have a motion on this? Peter?
Mr. Chairman, I would move that we approve the non-union compensation plan as presented by the town administrator.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to amend the personnel bylaw plan for 2017 in keeping with union increases. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Just a notation on that. The money is in the budget, just if people are watching at home, so there's not anything inconsistent with what's in the budget.
Thank you, Chris. Town administrators report?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do have a couple of items. I'll try to rattle through these. I did have the opportunity. I came in on Sunday and sat through the Monomoy High School graduation, and it was neat. It was actually a nice event to see, and I thought the kids did an outstanding job. So that was the first time. I think last year my own daughter graduated, so I couldn't attend. So I had my own activities. So it was nice to be there. Also, last week I went out with some folks from DPW and the Traffic Safety Committee, and we looked at the Route 39 and Pleasant Bay Road area. That's a very dangerous intersection, and we have been kind of picking away at that. We did do some improvements that make it hopefully a little bit safer. Unfortunately, the data that came in, 13, 14 to 15, all stayed fairly consistent with the number of accidents. And the problem is we didn't have any data in 16. So talking to the police department, they said that they thought just from their observations that the number of accidents had been significantly reduced. So some of those improvements that we made last November, may have had a positive impact. So we did have folks from Mass DOT out there with us. MassDOT is the transportation folks, and they did highlight some sight distance issues, so we will be taking out some shrubs and things of that nature to improve the sight distance in terms of that. So we have made, I think, some progress, and once we get that report finalized we had authorized, the board had authorized a road safety audit, is what they call it. Once that gets finalized, we'll present those findings to the board. But at least very encouraging. Last week, I did go 2 long days driving into the city of Boston for procurement training. There are a couple people, I know Carolyn has her certification as a chief procurement officer or Massachusetts Certified Procurement Officer. So I'm in the process of getting my recertification done. So just more classes that need to be done, but we're working our way through that. I think it's important by charter that it's not mandated by state law that you have to be a certified procurement officer, but I think just for due diligence and good practice, it would make sense to have that certification. So I want to continue that. Also, I did want to just follow up with the board. Last week, we had a discussion about the library project, and what I'd like to do is kind of, I don't think the board took a formal action in terms of that, so I would like to draft up kind of my understanding as to what transpired at that, and then the specific question that came up was, should we use the consultant, who I can't remember the name of the consultant, but should we use the consultant to actually now do the design and put the bid spec out? And, you know, I think that it's always good to have clarity when we do these things to make sure that the board officially votes something. So I will draft something up, and hopefully we'll have that back for the next meeting so we can move on that project. And then also, I did want to just highlight something on the middle school. I had at least an initial discussion with the chair. We do have the money that was budgeted for the middle school operation was put in the operating budget. So that money goes away come June 30th unless we encumber it for certain reasons. That building has undergone a couple things that I think in my discussion with Sean Libby, a quick discussion this morning, that I think we really should address. One is that we do not have hot water operating in that building. So if we're going to use that at a little bit higher intensity level, we should have hot water so people can actually wash their hands with hot water. So I think that that's something that we're going to look at to see if there's available money to do. The other that Mr. Libby had brought to my attention was that there's two, I want to call them portable classrooms, trailers. Trailers, I guess, is the more technical name in the back. And they have their own system, they have their own water, I think they have a different sprinkler system. And he had brought up the point that those trailers, in my experience, I mean, they have a useful life realistically of 15, maybe 20 years at the most. I have no idea how long those have been there. I would suffice to say well beyond their useful life. And he had pointed out that we may be able to realize some savings and make the building more attractive by removing those trailers. I think I did share a quick story that the school department, when they had the high school, they had some trailers, and they had a gentleman offered to take them for $1. So it's not a great deal. He was coming up from a different part of the country. He was going to bring his 18-wheeler up and move them out. So he paid the town $1, and he had free rent for 3 months, and we had to send our police department down to evict him. So the tractor trailer never showed up. So I don't know what the value of these are, other than to share that as a real story. That was just my first year here that had transpired. I think certainly by procurement law, we should market those and see if there is any value to them. If not, I think we should give serious consideration to having those removed as an impediment to the operation of the building. So I just wanted to kind of at least point out a couple of those things that we're looking at. And I know you have goals and objectives under the Selectmen's portion, so I won't discuss any of the elements unless, Mr. Chairman, when you and I chatted, is there anything you want me to cover in addition? But those were a few of the highlights.
No, I think what I'd like to do, we'll get this as a topic, put it on the agenda, and we'll walk through the whole school.
I just had a question. Why would we have more people going through the middle school now? That we need hot water? The only reason that it's open at all is to keep it on an open status.
Yeah, I think there's there'll be a lost opportunity. At June 30th, we're going to potentially turn back money that will be converted to free cash because it's part of the operating budget. So if we wanted to spend that money, what would we put that money towards in terms of making minimal improvements to the building so it maintains its ability to be, continue to be used for the purposes that we're currently using it for. So it would strictly be to maintain kind of the status quo and give us the opportunity.
And there are more people using it, so there's.
Yeah, but
seems to be more and more
they don't
people.
have to be more people using it.
Okay.
You know, unless
And
there's,
I guess the question is,
do you want more people?
The valid
well,
question.
how is it being used at the moment? Is there, I'll just call it usage creep going on? Should we have some say in whether we stop it, enhance it, fund it, whatever it is during this transition phase? So I think hopefully, Mr. Chairman, will, along with what we do at the building, the interim part we'll bring back at some point and have a discussion about. So I think that's,
Yeah, or you just made some free cash, that's all.
We'll put it on the agenda for soon.
That concludes my comments this evening, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Selectmen's report, I added Selectmen liaison for 2016, 2017, committee interview process, and Selectmen goals and objectives. So A and C, we put into the package what we did last year and who was the liaisons to which committees, as well as the liaison policy. So I just put that in there so you could look at it and put together a list of who should do, if you want to switch anything. Julie obviously needs to be put into a place. I mean, for the interim, we could put her into Linda's seat, but then I think everybody should have some input. Maybe you come back to the next meeting.
I actually think it's healthy to change things up on a periodic basis, and I would just suggest, you know, we all look at what we had last year or this year, that we at least say, okay, what two would we, you know, let somebody else have fun with, and throw those on the table and see what kind of interest, and if, you know, there isn't an interest in somebody picking up this one or that one, then maybe you retain it, but I think it's always good to get, you know, just a little bit of turnover, if you will.
Well, if you would, just send me your recommendations, and I'll put them
Yep,
together in
okay.
a list, and then we can trade at the next
Good.
meeting.
Happy to do that.
Janelle?
Just to update, Linda actually took real estate and open space last January or December. Even though it's still listed under me, it does go up on Linda's.
Send me that in a note with the other ones, please. And then the goals and objectives, also put in last year's goals and objectives. I think other than Julie, who wasn't here, we all had some concerns with some of the goals and objectives, and I don't think we spent a lot of time on some of them. So I want you to put some thought into what's important for you, and we'll put together a reasonable list. But any suggestions you can send me now, I'll start to organize it, and we'll continue to add to it. And then the interview committee, Angela, do you want to?
I'd like to make some comments. Janelle, Sandy, and I met on Friday and discussed process that we're going to be following, or would like to follow, and a couple of activities that we would like to explore. In terms of what we would be doing, Sandy believes that by the 13th of June, she'll be able to send out the letters to the people whose appointments have ended, you know, will have ended at the end of June, and those that wanted to be reappointed will be handled that way, and that's when that will occur. We also have about 4 or 5, I think, applications for openings that we already have that have been confirmed, and we'll be doing that interviewing next week. And then we looked at like 3 things. There was concern about how long some people have been on committees, and some have been on an exceedingly long time. And we would like to take a look at the thought of would it enhance the committees if they had some new blood? And if that was agreed upon, how would we go about that? We don't have any intention to pull somebody, you know, by the ear off the committee, but how would you encourage this to happen if you want to discuss that? So we probably take a look at that. We want to take a look at whether a charter change is helpful if we change how we have to notify of new openings. Do we have to run 10 days worth of ads in newspapers, or, oh, he's gone, thank God, or whether we can use email, electronics, et cetera, et cetera. And the main thing is, how do we encourage more of our residents to become committee members are interested in joining a committee. And there have been all sorts of suggestions which we should think about, like redoing the Saturday meetings we used to have at the community center with the various committees, each having a table to sell, joining them. We did that for a couple of years. It seemed to work for a couple of years and then kind of disappeared. So those are three areas that I don't know if you have any.
Well, I think you covered it.
And that's, so I think over the next couple of months, we'll try and think of solutions, bring them to the selectmen for discussion and a vote. And by the way, if anybody has an idea on any of those subjects, let us know.
Okay, that was the intent of those three items, was just to get the ball rolling.
One quick thing.
Go ahead.
Maybe we could also discuss which committees aren't even viable anymore. Last year I brought this up, but they're still listed on the website, many of them that don't even meet. Well, the middle school is still under Angela's name here. We don't even have that committee anymore.
Shush, I wanted to keep that.
Yeah. And then just, whether we could combine a couple, like maybe bikeways and trails could be combined. Just something like that. Maybe we could also add that to the agenda when we are talking about becoming liaisons again.
Absolutely. Okay, the last thing I had for Selectmen's report was, I also attended the graduation, and I thought that they did an amazing job. Instead of a speaker, they had the kids speak, so the kids were part of every process of that graduation. We had 104 graduates. Two communities donated a total of $345,000 in scholarships and a laptop. But it was a very, very nice ceremony. The staff did a great job putting it on and setting it up. So really, the school deserves a lot of credit for that great event. Peter?
I just request sometime in the future, since the state passed this new information law, request for information that comes in, just what it all means and how we're going to handle that and what the implications are. You hear stories that it could almost bankrupt you, time-wise and copy machine-wise and all that. But I'd like to make sure we understand it, and through our discussions, the public understands it as to what's required of us, of the staff, if you will, or any department head or whatever, when those kinds of information requests come in. So it doesn't have to be right away, but sometime during the summer, I'd like to have that discussion.
Excellent.
Okay, thank you.
Janelle?
I have nothing.
Julie?
Nothing.
Angela? We are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nice
Thank
work.
you.
Boy, I got
It's a long first meeting.
I got the lengthy